All right, let's try this again. I'm not sure if we can count this as the second or third time, but we are here. I have coffee, and we are going to talk about this particular layout this morning. So, if you attempted to attend yesterday or today, earlier, I apologize. Yesterday, I recorded the whole thing and took off my audio for half of it. And this morning, I prepared and arrived at what I thought was 10 a.m. and I came into my office and all the clocks say 11 and I'm in a twilight zone of, oh my gosh, I've lost an hour of my life. So I did realize there was a time change. I even posted about it and talked to my husband about it, but somehow one of the few manual clocks in my home did not get changed. And that was my reference for am I on time or not? So I am sure you have all been there. And I want to thank you though for those of you who are watching in the replay. I hope this is valuable to you. All right, let's have some more coffee. I get my coffee from drinktrade.com right now. Not sponsored. Oh my gosh, that sounds so sponsored. But I love the variety of coffees. And so every 3 weeks, they send me something new. And it's such a fun little treat as part of our ongoing let's be at home all the time life. All right. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about this page. This kind of came very organically. I had so much fun. It kind of fell out of me, both the design and the story. I had it on my list to document about my cat who passed away towards the end of last year. And I kind of hadn't felt ready. I'd done a few little bits of journaling about it, but hadn't made a layout. And I came across these photos recently of my daughter. They're actually 2 different days. I think these 2 are the same day, and this one is a different day of her snuggling with the cat. And this one I know for sure is just before we took her to the vet. And she was almost, let's see, she was 20 years old or almost 20 years old, or I guess probably would have been 20 this past February. Yeah, so she was 19. And she lived a really long life. And a lot of the past few years of it were quite hard on her, but she stuck around. And in my journaling, I wrote how I felt like she stuck around to really give Emily just this such a huge, fierce love of animals. Emily is very obsessed with animals. We're actually babysitting a guinea pig right now, and she can't get enough of this little critter. She talks to it, she feeds it lots of treats, probably more than it should, but the guinea pig is getting a ton of love right now. Okay, so let me tell you how the design part of this kind of organically came about. I'm going to switch over to this screen here. So I saw this layout in Allie Edwards' Craft the Story Facebook group from Deneen Marie. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this page. And she even commented how she didn't even have all of the physical products yet. She just had the digital kit of the new 12 by 12 Hearts collection. And so she used the digital paper as her starting point, making these 3 by 3 circles inside the O's. And then she journaled directly on the background and then used some of her other embellishments that she already had to complement that. And I just love the structure of it and the combination of hybrid techniques. So when I sat down, I started playing with this paper and I felt like I didn't want to directly copy this. I wanted to do something inspired by it. Um, and also because of the scale that I was working in, I knew I wanted to do 8.5 by 11. This particular paper scaled better to the smaller size because that's what it was intended for. So let's bring up Photoshop here. So this is let's say the final hybrid portion of the layout. So we'll flip back here just for a second for the reference. You can see I added these embellishments. So we've got the 3 felt hearts and then 3 chipboard pieces. And I did all of this yesterday, and I can't decide if this heart is actually navy or if it's just like a very dark gray. We're going to say it's gray, but in certain lights, it does look a little bit navy, but that's okay. Overall very monochromatic other than this, like, pop of purple of Emily's iPad. Um, but we had 6 dimensional embellishments. The background, this is all on cardstock, and then these are photos that I printed out and cut out. So we'll flip back here to Photoshop, and I'm gonna turn off some layers to kind of show you what we're aiming for, and then I will walk you through putting it all together. Turn off the layer. So I started here with this 12 by 12 digital pattern paper. And I knew I was going to end up cropping it because of I was working in 8.5 by 11. And that was kind of my inspiration starting point. I want to fill in one of these hearts. And so I did my journaling inside that heart. And I will show you exactly how I did that. And then I was thinking, okay, what if we fill in some of the hearts with pattern paper? And I wasn't sure if I was gonna cut this out separately or do it digitally, and I ended up just making this is the hybrid foundation that I printed this, what you see here, on cardstock. Then I filled in those other hearts with my photos, and I turned off all these layers, and I printed this page on photo paper and then cut out the hearts. So it was really just 2 run-throughs of my printer, one on cardstock, one on photo paper, and then really assembling everything. I love hybrid pages. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I've really gotten into doing my journaling hybrid. But I will say this is probably the first time that I have cut out a shape by hand in a long while. I think I'm usually a little more precise. I even thought about tracing this with my silhouette and getting my silhouette to cut those hearts, but I think the effort to do that would be more than it was worth, particularly because these are hand-drawn wonky hearts. They're not precise designs that all need to be uniform because they aren't uniform. So I figured hand cut would be perfectly appropriate here. All right, let's dive into a new canvas. And as I do that, I'm curious, those of you who are watching live, if you have any questions for me, things you want me to make sure that I explain in the process. And welcome to those of you who are watching live. Thank you for spending some time with me on Sunday. All right, we have our blank canvas here. All right, okay. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add that pattern paper. So I like to go file place. Some folks really prefer to drag in their papers. The behavior tends to be similar. I think it's a little bit different in Photoshop Elements, but in Photoshop, the behavior I think is the same. It's been a while since I did exclusively digital. So here are my 12 by 12 papers, and I thought about playing with the Conversation Hearts one, but I ended up going with this one. Now, before I commit this to the page, I'm going to press Shift. I'm on a PC, and I'm going to go ahead and expand this to fill the background. I think that's pretty centered, but I want to make sure. So I'm going to select these 2 layers and make sure they're centered. It didn't move, so it was fine because I scaled from both corners and really made sure it was covering the edges. I think we're fine there. Okay, I'm going to delete the background now. Now, this is the fun part where we get into filling this heart. And I'll be honest, I haven't done this in so long. And once I did it, I was like, oh, yeah, that's how you do it. But if it's not something you do all the time, the steps that you take, they're not super intuitive, even as a regular Photoshop user. So I'm going to use the Magic Wand selection tool, make sure my layer is selected, and I'm going to select that heart. Okay. Now I'm going to go to select, modify, contract. So contract makes the shape smaller. I'm choosing 40 pixels here, and I tried it at like 20, 30. Those I think would have been fine-ish, but I wanted to make sure when I printed that it would not get cut off here on the edge. If you have a lot of control over your printer experience, so this is if you're printing at home and you have control over your printing experience, and you can change the expansion to either none or small, 40 pixels will be enough. Um, if you do not, if you're printing outside the home or you don't know how to change that or don't think you can, I would do 50 or 60 pixels. That will give you a little bit smaller of an area, but it's going to make sure that you don't have it cut off on the edge here. And I'm making sure this apply effect at canvas bounds is selected. Otherwise, it's going to contract only on the inside and not at the edge. So we'll do 40 pixels here. Okay, so we're going to right click, make work path, say okay. And then we'll do edit, define custom shape, and say okay. Now, this is the fun part. You click over to your text tool and click inside, and it'll put some dummy text in there for you, and you can just start typing. It's so genius. I'm going to bring up my journaling here, copy that in here for you guys. And let's see. Looks like it cut off the last word. Not sure why I did that because it's exactly the same as I did it before. Um, so we'll just delete that. There we go. We'll just delete that word for now. So at least we have the period there. We have our journaling inside the heart. And if you want to even do the whole rest of the page physical, you could just print this out because I love just doing journaling on a background. You could even turn off this layer and end up using your other regular pattern paper if you want to use this pattern paper. Anyway, that aside, we have our journaling in our heart. So what we're going to do now to get the other pattern papers and the photos is very, very similar and actually quite a bit easier. So we'll make sure our layer is selected that has the hearts as our reference point. And we're going to take the magic wand tool and I'm going to select this heart right here. Now up here, I have a tolerance set at 0. I believe the default is 32, but I've changed this to 0. And what this says is, how close to this color do you want me to trace this? And so by 0, it means only pixels that are exactly this color I'm going to trace around. When it was set at 32, it would go a little bit outside the bounds because there's some very light gray because it's kind of like a speckled textured background. And so the higher the tolerance, the more additional pixels it's going to select because it thinks they're close enough. And there's certainly many circumstances in which when you're using the magic wand that you'd want that. But I want the smoothest edge for my heart here. And so that's why I picked a tolerance of 0. So I'm going to add a layer and I'm going to use my fill tool and I'm just going to fill in the shape of the heart so that we can see this one is ready. We'll deselect the layers. Oop, didn't want to do that. There we go. And then we're going to do that again. Same process, new layer, magic wand tool. Might help if we select the right layer. There we go. And fill. Oh, all right, Jennifer, make sure you're clicking the right layers. There we go. Let's be patient here. So there we have the 2 layers for our pattern papers. I'm going to do the same thing that I did when I was adding the background pattern paper. I'm going to select the layer where I want it, file, place embedded, and I believe these are in the 6x8 selection. So the first one is this tiny heart print. I'm going to move that around, commit that to the page, then enter, and then create clipping mask. And here's where you can drag this around if you want the hearts to be in a certain place. You can also press shift and scale if you don't like the size of your pattern and you want to change the scale of it overall. We'll do the same thing for this bottom layer. And I'm using this little script paper here. I'm pressing enter to commit it to the page, right click, create clipping mask. I'm not a keyboard shortcut user. If you are, fantastic. You probably already know how to do this. I find especially that the more that I am paying attention to the functions that I'm doing, such as create clipping mask, release clipping mask, etc., the more I'm able to remember it and the more I'm even able to teach you. Because if I just told you, control whatever all the time with keyboard shortcuts, we're not learning what it is that we're actually doing. And when you have those skills, whether it's in Photoshop or photo editing, when you know what it is you're doing, it's more replicable to other software because you're looking for a function that sounds the same or even uses the exact same words, if that makes sense. Um, okay, here. Well, let's do the hearts. So this is our foundation. This is what I printed on the cardstock. And I really love the look of textured cardstock. You, of course, can use smooth cardstock because I like the contrast between that and the smoothness of my photos. And I really just like the dimensional look it gives to my layouts. Okay, we're going to select this heart up here. We'll create a new layer for that, fill it in. Select this heart, create a new layer, fill it in. And same thing. This heart, create a new layer, fill it in. Okay. Now we're going to add our photos using the same process. Select the layer that we want to add it to. Place. I believe my photos are on my desktop, are they? Yes. So first we have this photo of Emily. Going to scale this one down a little bit. So I'm hitting shift to make sure it doesn't warp or want to make sure it scales proportionally. And then I can drag this around to where I want it. I think I want it a little bit smaller. Kind of want to tell that is a cat there. So I want the cat's ears over a little bit. Okay. Now we'll do this one. File, place. This one is this photo. I think this one only needs to be shrunk a little bit. Right click, create clipping mask. And then finally this one. Poor kitty. She looks irritated. Don't we all these days? All right, I can try to make this one a little bit smaller to get more of her face in there. All right. Now, just a little trick here, and this is going to be imperfect. I noticed when I put this all together that these two photos were edited pretty similarly. And maybe these are the two that were taken the same day. This one looks a little bit different. It looks a little bit warmer. And so what I actually did is I created an adjustment layer here in order to adjust that. Now, this is me being totally finicky, but I went down here to the little circle that's half shaded in, and I think I started with color balance. So I thought this was a little bit yellow, so I was going to bump up the blue a little bit. And we're just looking at this photo, so I'm going to have to clip that in a second. And then I want to increase the magenta here. It's a little too much. Okay. Go back to our layers, and we can see right now, if you click this off and click this on, it's actually adjusting the whole thing. So I'm going to right click and create clipping mask to make sure this adjustment is just to that particular photo. I'm actually going to do the same thing here with brightness, and I'm just going to bump that up just a little bit. You can see at the beginning, it's doing everything, but I'm just looking at that top left photo. Let's see here. Okay. We'll go back to our layers and we'll make sure that one is clipped in as well. So it's a little bit closer. I think I got a little bit closer in my final layout. But if you bring your photos together and realize, something's not quite right, you can do these little adjustments in Photoshop. I don't edit very many photos in Photoshop at all. But if you kind of know what some of the things you're looking for, you can do it a little bit of the time just to make those final tweaks on your page. All right, we got some comments here. Let's see. I'm going to show Amy's comment. Honestly, I haven't tried digital scrapbooking. When I started scrapbooking, I was learning graphic design, and the idea of scrapping on the computer wasn't something that sounded fun to me. And then this one, 20 years later, I'm not doing design and I'm thinking this would be a fun change. Thanks for going step by step. It's so funny because I started digital scrapbooking. I started scrapbooking as a digital scrapbooker. And part of it was that I was wanting something that I could do from my laptop in the corner of my bedroom. And I've told this story so many times. I was a newlywed, but marrying into a blended family. We had two teenage boys at home and a large dog. And so the cat and I, we hung out in the corner of the bedroom with the laptop and we learned to digital scrapbook. But there was a certain point where I was spending all my time on the computer, and I'm like, "I miss the tactile experience of scrapbooking, or even just any kind of crafting, because 'cause I've always been a little bit of a crafter, and I wanted to do things with my hands, and so I really went away from it. And now, obviously, I'm still on the computer a lot, but I love what hybrid gives me and the flexibility to do fun pages like this, and to have more precision in my journaling without any handwriting anxiety of how it's going to turn out. And so the combination is really super fun. So Amy's also asking, what is your favorite place to find digital papers? That's a great question. I would love if anybody else is watching, if you shared any comments for Amy. These are from Allie Edwards. She is a traditional paper product designer. You may already know her. But she has a lot of digital products, and I'm looking forward to her releasing more digital papers that are in the 12 by 12 size, because the smaller items don't always scale up very well. The Lily Pad probably is my favorite digital shop. They have a really nice range of more minimalist to more artsy designers, as well as many that are traditional. I think they have a really great range of different design styles. So that's what I would recommend. It's the-lilypad.com. So definitely my favorite. All right. So just a reminder here, and actually I'm going to show you one more thing in Photoshop. If we go over here to this one, this was the original example. You can see that I have these in folders. And when you're trying to figure out, okay, which layers am I printing or not, it's helpful to do that. So I'm going to select all the layers that are my photos, and I'm going to drag those down here to a folder. And so it's called a group. And I'm just going to label that photos. Then I'm going to take the pad and paper ones, select those, drag them to the folder, and rename that to papers. Okay. So now I really have I have 4 layer groups here. I have the background, I have the photos, the papers, and the journaling. So I know I want to turn off the photos to print this on cardstock, and then I want to turn off everything else to print that on photo paper. I use Canon Print Studio Pro. If you're not getting the results that you want directly from Photoshop, I recommend installing the software that your printer recommends. Often that will give you a little bit more control and sometimes better communication with your printer. I definitely recommend kind of testing both, because the results may vary. So often, I think when we're talking about printer quality or how printers work, the printer is fine, the ink is fine. Sometimes it's the communication between the device and the printer. And so I recommend kind of testing the same thing, like even this page, or even just one photo. Print one photo directly from Photoshop, print another with the printer software, and see the difference. Which one do you like better? Which one looks most like the screen? And what settings do you have to maybe tweak that so you get better results? Whether we're talking about expansion of borderless printing, or we're talking about colors. So, for example, I'll just bring this up real quick. Take a second. All right, so I'm gonna drag this over here. It's being a little fussy for me. Okay. So here's Canon Print Studio Pro. It will print even if it's sideways, but I always just make it right side up to make my brain work, and let's say we were printing this just as a full digital page, um, I would make sure it's borderless. Down here is where I can select that expansion. So I have small, because if I know that if I do none, there'll be a little bit of a white edge. And so I have choices of none, small, medium, large, and standard is the most. And so I'll just select that just so you can see it. And I want you to watch the borders of the layout. So you can see that expands quite a bit, and this journaling is gonna be right up there close to the edge. And so that's why I recommend maybe selecting 50 or 60 pixels because of that, because you don't want any chance that that's gonna get cut off. But the thing that I wanted to show you is that I've always noticed that my printer prints a little bit too yellow, or maybe my monitor calibration is a little bit off. And so I have this selected to yellow -3. And I find this gives the best replication of what I see on the screen and what I see in real life. Because it's not always about what is perfect, because it's going to look different everywhere. I just want it to match because I'm going to edit to what I see on my screen. And then I want what's coming out of the printer to match that. So your printer software may have these features that you would maybe not even have discovered. And it's really handy to lean into that, because the printer software kind of knows best, can communicate best with the printer. So if you're having trouble, definitely check settings, try different things, both within Photoshop or Photoshop Elements, and try your printer software as well. All right, let's pop up back here and see what's going on. Okay. Great questions, Amy. Thank you. Okay. Um, she says, your own personal retreat getaway. I completely understand. I craved a hands-on creative outlet too. Yes, that was an interesting time. It was really overwhelming to move from living by myself. I lived by myself for a year prior to that, to going into a house with 3 males and a large dog. It was a lot, and we made it through, and I learned to be a much more easygoing type person. And what weight of cardstock is your go-to for printing? So I used just classic Basil white textured cardstock. I think it's from the Basil chromatic line. Um, I believe it's 80 pound. I don't tend to use I know there is super, super heavy, but this is just standard textured cardstock that you'd use for scrapbooking. I have printed on much thicker things, and I don't tend to have a problem with it. Um, I would say maybe 110, 130 is probably the thickest I've printed on with my particular printer. I have the Canon Pixma Pro 100. It is a large format printer. Um, but I have to say, especially because I'm doing 8.5 by 11 scrapbooking, I rarely print larger than 8.5 by 11 these days. But I like that option that I can print from I think the narrowest is like 3.5 inches wide. So I can do like a 3.5 by 6 inch thing all the way up to, I think I have paper here that is 13 by 19, I think I can't read that far. Oh my gosh, I need my glasses. 13 by 19 inches is the largest paper that I have for the printer. And so if I'm going to do something that's full 12 by 12, I will often print those size of photos for not for layouts, but for framing in our home. I will print those on the 13 by 19 paper and then crop those down to 12 by 12. All right. Okay. Any more questions? This has been so fun. I apologize again for the timing issues, but this is being recorded, of course. I know many of you will be watching in the replay. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And if you like this type of tutorial, please leave a comment and let me know. I'm thinking of doing more things like this because I totally geek out over techie type things. I love Trello for organizing all my plans and ideas. I love Lightroom for managing my photos, for editing my photos, and for doing my Project Life photo book. And of course, I love Photoshop for doing these fun little projects so that I can make, beautiful hybrid pages that kind of combine the best of everything. One final thing I'll point out here that we didn't talk about was the title. I could have, printed that out and die cut it. I could have found an embellishment that I already had, but I ended up stamping directly on the background. I have the Tim Holtz mini stamp platform, which I believe has been discontinued, but whether you have that or a Misty or something like that, I recommend using a stamp platform if you are stamping directly on a background and you don't wanna risk having to redo your whole page. This one I had to actually re-ink twice or just once, but I had to re-ink it. It was a little bit fussy and it is intended, and probably I'm not even sure it comes off. Let's see. So you can see how the top of the F is actually designed to be that way in the stamp, but it ended up being a little the textured cardstock was not filling in, if you will. Um, and I wanted a pretty clear impression, so I did re-ink it. And using a stamp platform, it allowed you to do that and to make sure that you get that impression in the right place. So yeah, Denise points out very true. The Tim Holtz one got discontinued because of lawsuits with Misty, so I can understand that. It is a little bit of a different design, but Misty is the original kind of stamp platform, and they deserve that. It's a great invention, and I'm so glad that we have that type of tool now in our stamping lives to make sure that we have precision and less anxiety over how our stamping is going to come out, particularly with textured cardstock. So I mentioned that I love textured cardstock, and so a lot of my decisions about stamping have to do with, is this going to come out on textured cardstock? Am I going to get a good impression? How do I make sure that impression is good? And some of you guys know I've been kind of obsessing about the distress oxides recently. I'm kind of collecting them. I love them a lot. And part of that is because I feel like they give a really nice impression on textured cardstock. I am not a card maker. Card makers love their smooth cardstock, and I will sometimes do things on smooth cardstock. But as I mentioned earlier, I like the um, the variation in textures on my layout. So that's why I love the textured, and I look for tools that are going to help support that. All right. Thanks, guys. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Take care, and you know where to find me right here on YouTube, Simple Scrapper, or at Simple Scrapper on Instagram, Simple Scrapper everywhere. Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye.